What happens when one of the biggest pop stars in the world comes face to face with questions she absolutely refuses to answer? The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and what started as a routine promotional interview quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable television moments of the year. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below, because this interview went completely off the rails in ways nobody saw coming. Jennifer Lopez settled into the plush interview chair across from Jenna Bush Hager, the morning sun streaming through the studio windows as cameras rolled for what was supposed to be a lighthearted conversation about her latest projects. The atmosphere felt relaxed, almost casual, with Jenna's trademark warm smile greeting her guest. "Jennifer, thank you so much for being here with us today," Jenna began, her voice carrying that familiar morning television cheerfulness. "I have to say, you look absolutely radiant, as always." "Thank you, Jenna. It's great to be here," Jennifer replied, though there was something slightly guarded in her tone, a subtle tension that seemed to contradict her polished exterior. Jenna shuffled through her notes briefly before looking up, with genuine enthusiasm. "So let's dive right in. Your fans are buzzing about your upcoming tour, and I know everyone's dying to hear about the creative process behind your latest album. What inspired this new chapter for you?" Jennifer's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, her shoulders straightening as she launched into what sounded like a well-rehearsed response. "Well, this album really comes from a place of authenticity and growth. I've been through so much personally and professionally, and I wanted to create something that reflects where I am in my life right now." "That's beautiful," Jenna nodded, leaning forward slightly. "And speaking of personal growth, I think a lot of people admire how you've navigated the public eye for decades. But I'm curious about something that's been making headlines recently." The shift in Jennifer's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. Her smile became more fixed, her eyes slightly narrower. "What do you mean by that?" Jenna's expression remained friendly, but there was a journalistic determination creeping into her voice. "Well, there have been quite a few reports about some behind-the-scenes tensions during your recent projects. Sources close to your team have mentioned some pretty significant creative disagreements and, frankly, some unprofessional behavior on set." "I'm sorry, what?" Jennifer's voice rose slightly, the polished veneer beginning to crack. "What sources are you talking about exactly?" "Multiple industry insiders have come forward with stories about demanding behavior, unrealistic expectations placed on crew members, and frankly, some pretty harsh treatment of people who are just trying to do their jobs," Jenna continued, her tone remaining measured but persistent. "I think viewers would appreciate hearing your perspective on these allegations." Jennifer's hands gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles visibly whitening. "I don't know what kind of interview you think this is, but I came here to talk about my music, my tour, my creative projects. I didn't come here to defend myself against unnamed sources and gossip." "I understand that, Jennifer, and we absolutely want to hear about your creative work," Jenna replied, not backing down. "But when there are consistent reports from multiple productions about the same types of issues, don't you think your fans deserve to hear your side of the story?" "My side of the story." Jennifer's voice was getting sharper, more defensive. "What story?" "You're talking about anonymous sources, industry insiders, people who won't even put their names to these claims. This is exactly the kind of tabloid nonsense that I've spent my entire career trying to rise above." Jenna glanced at her notes, clearly prepared for this resistance. "Actually, Jennifer, some of these sources have been named. There was a detailed account from a choreographer who worked on your recent music video shoot, and several crew members from your last film project have spoken on the record about working conditions." The color drained slightly from Jennifer's face, but her defensive stance only intensified. "I don't care what some disgruntled employee said to get their 15 minutes of fame. I work hard, I have high standards, and yes, I expect professionalism from everyone I work with. If that makes me difficult, then I guess I'm difficult. But there's a difference between having high standards and creating a hostile work environment." Jenna pressed on. One former assistant described having to walk on eggshells constantly, never knowing what might trigger an outburst. Another crew member said they witnessed you screaming at a production coordinator until they cried. All because of a minor scheduling conflict. Jennifer stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the studio floor. "Are you kidding me right now? You brought me here under false pretenses. This was supposed to be about my music, about my art, about the positive things I'm bringing to the world." "Jennifer, please sit down," Jenna said, her voice remaining calm but firm. "These are legitimate questions that many people in the industry are asking. If these stories aren't true, this is your opportunity to set the record straight." "Set the record straight." Jennifer's voice was now clearly agitated, her carefully maintained composure completely abandoned. "I don't owe anyone an explanation for how I conduct my business or how I run my projects. I've been in this industry for over 2 decades, and I've earned the right to have things done the way I want them done." Jenna leaned back slightly, but her journalistic instincts kept her pushing forward. But Jennifer, surely you can understand why people might be concerned when there are reports of assistants quitting after just weeks on the job, when crew members describe feeling intimidated and disrespected. You know what? Jennifer grabbed her purse from beside her chair, slinging it over her shoulder with sharp, angry movements. This interview is over. I came here. Jennifer, wait, Jenna called out, her professional composure intact despite the escalating tension. We're still live, and I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Jennifer paused mid-stride, spinning around to face Jenna with fire in her eyes. A misunderstanding? There's no misunderstanding. You lured me here with promises of discussing my creative projects. And instead, you're throwing tabloid garbage at me like some kind of ambush journalist. I'm not ambushing you, Jenna replied firmly, gesturing for Jennifer to return to her seat. These are questions that legitimate entertainment journalists across the industry are asking. If you're truly committed to authenticity, as you mentioned earlier, shouldn't that include addressing these concerns directly? Jennifer's laugh was bitter, almost mocking. Oh, so now you're lecturing me about authenticity. That's rich, coming from someone who built their career on their last name and morning show fluff pieces. The studio fell silent, except for the quiet hum of cameras still rolling. Jenna's expression hardened slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. That's an unfair characterization, Jennifer, and frankly, it's deflecting from the real issues we're trying to discuss. Real issues? Jennifer's voice reached a new level of indignation. The real issue is that successful women in this industry get torn down the moment they demand excellence. When a male director yells at crew members, he's passionate and dedicated. When I have the same expectations, I'm difficult and demanding. Jenna nodded thoughtfully. That's actually a valid point about double standards in the industry, and I think many viewers would agree with you on that. But the specific incidents we're talking about go beyond professional standards, such as Jennifer demanded, crossing her arms defensively. Jenna consulted her notes again, clearly prepared for this exact moment. Well, there was the incident during your Las Vegas residency, rehearsals where you allegedly threw a water bottle at a backup dancer because they missed a step during a routine run-through. The dancer ended up with a bruised shoulder and had to seek medical attention. Jennifer's face flushed with anger. That is a complete fabrication. I have never, ever physically harmed anyone on any of my sets or stages. That's not just unprofessional. It's assault, and I would never do such a thing. So you're saying that story is completely false? Jenna pressed. I'm saying that story is a malicious lie designed to make me look like some kind of monster, Jennifer shot back. And the fact that you're repeating it on national television without giving me any advance notice is exactly the kind of gotcha journalism that's ruining this industry. Jenna leaned forward, her tone becoming more direct. Jennifer, I gave your publicist a full list of topics we planned to cover. Your team approved this interview, knowing we would be discussing recent controversies. My publicist told me this was going to be about my tour and my new music. Jennifer replied, her voice tight with frustration. Nobody said anything about relitigating every piece of gossip that's been written about me in the past 6 months. But these aren't just gossip pieces, Jenna countered. Some of these reports come from respected entertainment journalists with decades of experience. Are you saying they're all lying? Jennifer threw her hands up in exasperation. I'm saying that people will say anything for money, for attention, for their 15 minutes of fame. I've been dealing with this kind of character assassination my entire career. Okay, let's talk about your career then, Jenna said, shifting tactics. You've worked with hundreds of people over the years. Surely some of them have had positive experiences working with you. Of course they have, Jennifer replied, seeming slightly relieved by the change in direction. I have incredible relationships with so many talented people in this industry. I work with the same choreographers, the same producers, the same creative team members project after project because we have mutual respect and trust. That's great to hear, Jenna acknowledged. So when you work with people repeatedly, how do you handle disagreements or creative differences? Jennifer paused, seeming to consider her words more carefully. Look, I'm passionate about my work. I care deeply about every detail, every performance, every project I put my name on. Sometimes that means having difficult conversations, making tough decisions, pushing people to be their best. And when you push people, how do they typically respond? Jenna asked. Most people appreciate working with someone who cares as much as I do, Jennifer said, though there was a slight defensiveness creeping back into her tone. The people who can't handle that level of commitment usually don't last long on my team. Jenna seized on that statement immediately. So you acknowledge that people do leave your team regularly. Jennifer's eyes flashed with irritation. People leave every team in this industry. That's how entertainment works. Projects end. People move on to new opportunities. That doesn't mean there's some systematic problem. But what about the pattern? Jenna pressed. When multiple assistants quit within their first month, when crew members request to be reassigned from your projects, when there are consistent reports across different productions, doesn't that suggest something more than normal industry turnover? What it suggests, Jennifer said, her voice rising. Again, is that working at the highest level of this industry isn't for everyone. I don't have time to hold hands and coddle people who can't keep up with the pace and standards that success requires. Jennifer, there's a difference between maintaining high standards and treating people poorly. Jenna replied, several former employees have described feeling humiliated, disrespected, and even afraid to approach you with questions or concerns. Afraid? Jennifer laughed harshly. That's ridiculous. I run professional sets and professional businesses. If people feel intimidated, maybe it's because they're not used to working with someone who actually knows what they want and isn't afraid to ask for it. The tension in the studio was becoming palpable, with Jennifer's agitation growing more visible by the moment. Jenna glanced at the cameras, clearly aware that this interview was providing exact. Jennifer, I want to read you something, Jenna said, picking up a printed email from her desk. This is from Maria Santos, who worked as your personal assistant for 3 weeks last year. She says, and I quote, I've worked for demanding celebrities before, but Jennifer created an atmosphere of constant fear. She would scream at people for minor mistakes, change her mind multiple times about simple decisions, and then blame staff when things didn't go perfectly. I watched grown adults cry in bathroom stalls because they were so stressed. Jennifer's face went white, then immediately flushed red with rage. You have got to be kidding me. You're reading personal attacks from some disgruntled employee on national television. This is character assassination, plain and simple. She's not the only one. Jennifer, Jenna continued, undeterred. I have similar statements from 4 other former employees, all describing the same patterns of behavior. I don't care if you have statements from 40 employees, Jennifer snapped. None of these people were qualified for the positions they were hired for. Maria Santos, specifically, was recommended by someone I trusted, but she couldn't handle basic scheduling, couldn't follow simple instructions, and constantly made mistakes that cost time and money. So your position is that all of these people are lying or incompetent? Jenna asked. My position is that working for me requires a certain level of competence and professionalism that not everyone possesses. Jennifer replied coldly. I don't have time to train people how to do jobs they should already know how to do. Jenna leaned back in her chair, studying Jennifer's face carefully. Let me ask you this then. Do you think it's ever appropriate to raise your voice at employees? Jennifer hesitated for just a moment, and that hesitation spoke volumes. I think it's appropriate to be clear about expectations and consequences when those expectations aren't met. That's not what I asked, Jenna pressed. Do you think it's appropriate to yell at employees? I don't yell at anyone, Jennifer said firmly, though her own voice was raised as she said it. I speak with passion and conviction about my work. Jennifer, we actually have audio from one of these incidents, Jenna said quietly, and the studio fell completely silent. Jennifer's eyes went wide with shock and fury. Excuse me, you have what? A former crew member recorded part of an interaction during your last music video shoot, Jenna explained. They provided it to us as part of their statement about working conditions. That is illegal, Jennifer said, her voice deadly quiet now. Recording someone without their consent is a violation of privacy laws in most states. Actually, in this case, it was recorded in a state with one-party consent laws, Jenna replied calmly. And given that it took place on a professional film, set with multiple witnesses, there was no reasonable expectation of privacy. Jennifer stood up again, this time more slowly, more deliberately. You are not playing any audio of me without my explicit consent. If you even try, I will have my lawyers shut down this entire network. Jennifer, I'm not trying to embarrass you, Jenna said, her tone becoming more conciliatory. I'm trying to give you an opportunity to address these allegations directly. If there's context that people are missing, if there are explanations for your behavior, this is your chance to provide them. My behavior. Jennifer's voice was now shaking with anger. You want to talk about behavior? Let's talk about your behavior. You invited me here under false pretenses. You've spent this entire interview attacking my character, and now you're threatening to play illegally obtained recordings of private conversations. The conversations weren't private, Jennifer, and the recordings weren't illegally obtained. Jenna corrected. These were professional interactions that took place in front of multiple witnesses. I don't care about the technicalities, Jennifer shot back. This is a hit job, pure and simple. You're trying to destroy my reputation for ratings. Jenna shook her head. Jennifer, I'm trying to give you a platform to address serious allegations about your professional conduct. If these stories are false or taken out of context, this is your opportunity to set the record straight. Set the record straight. Jennifer laughed bitterly. How do you set the record straight against lies and gossip? How do you prove a negative? How do you convince people that anonymous sources are lying when they're telling stories that people want to believe? By being honest about what did happen, Jenna replied simply. By acknowledging where you might have made mistakes. By showing that you're willing to grow and change. Jennifer's expression hardened completely. I'm not going to sit here and confess to things I didn't do just to satisfy your narrative. I'm not going to apologize for having high standards and expecting people to meet them. So you maintain that all of these reports are completely fabricated? Jenna asked. I maintain that I am a professional who runs professional operations and expects professional behavior from everyone I work with, Jennifer replied. If that threatens some people, if that makes them uncomfortable, then they're probably not the right fit for my team. Jenna glanced at her notes one more time. Jennifer, I have one more question, and then we can move on to talking about your tours if you'd prefer. What question? Jennifer asked suspiciously. Several sources have mentioned that you have a list of rules that people have to follow when working with you. Things like not making eye contact unless you initiate it, not speaking unless spoken. 2. Specific ways that your dressing room has to be arranged. Can you tell us about these requirements? Jennifer's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, anger, and finally, a kind of cold fury. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard in my life. I don't have a list of rules for people. I don't forbid people from making eye contact. That's insane. So you're denying that these requirements exist? Jenna pressed. I'm denying that I'm some kind of dictator who treats people like servants. Jennifer replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. I have preferences about how I like my workspace organized. Just like every other professional in this industry, I have routines that help me prepare for performances and appearances. None of that is unusual or unreasonable. But some of your preferences have been described as excessive or demeaning, Jenna pointed out. Jennifer grabbed her purse again, slinging it over her shoulder with sharp, decisive movements. You know what? This is exactly why I rarely do interviews anymore. No matter what I say, no matter how I explain things, people are determined to paint me as some kind of monster. Jennifer, please don't leave, Jenna said, rising from her own chair. We still have 10 minutes left in the segment, and I really do want to hear about your upcoming projects. Jennifer paused at the edge of the interview area, her body language radiating tension and barely contained fury. You want to hear about my projects after spending the last 20 minutes trying to destroy my reputation? After threatening to play secret recordings of me, you think I'm going to sit back down and pretend like this is normal? I think your fans deserve to hear from you directly, Jenna replied, her voice remaining steady despite the chaos unfolding. They deserve to hear your side of these stories, and they deserve to hear about the work you're passionate about. Jennifer turned around slowly, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like hurt. My fans don't need to hear me defend myself against lies and gossip. My fans know who I am. They know the work I do, the passion I bring to every project, the decades of dedication I've put into this industry. But what about the people who work with you? Jenna asked, not backing down even as Jennifer's agitation reached new heights. Don't they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity? Everyone who works with me is treated with respect, Jennifer snapped. Everyone who works with me is paid well, given opportunities to advance their careers, and works on projects that they can be proud of, but respect goes both ways, and it includes doing your job competently and professionally. Jenna took a step closer, her journalist instincts fully engaged despite the volatile situation. Jennifer, can you honestly tell me that you've never lost your temper with an employee? That you've never said something in anger that you later regretted? The question hung in the air for several long seconds. Jennifer's face went through a series of micro-expressions, and for just a moment, it seemed like she might actually engage with the question honestly. You know what I regret, Jennifer said finally, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. I regret coming on this show. I regret trusting that you would conduct a professional interview instead of a tabloid ambush. And I regret wasting my time trying to have an honest conversation with someone who clearly has their mind made up. My mind isn't made up, Jennifer, Jenna replied. I'm asking you direct questions and giving you the opportunity to respond. That's what journalism is. Journalism? Jennifer laughed harshly. This isn't journalism. This is entertainment disguised as news. You're more interested in creating drama than finding truth. Jenna's expression hardened slightly. The truth is what I'm after, Jennifer. The truth about these allegations. The truth about your management style. The truth about what it's really like to work for one of the biggest stars in the world. The truth. Jennifer's voice rose again, all pretense of control abandoning her. The truth is that I've built an empire from nothing. I've created opportunities for hundreds of people, launched careers, supported families, generated millions of dollars for this industry, but none of that matters when there are anonymous sources willing to spread lies for money. They're not all anonymous, Jennifer. Jenna pointed out, some of these people have gone on record with their names attached to their statements, and I'm sure they're being well compensated for their stories. Jennifer shot back, do you have any idea how much money tabloids pay for negative stories about celebrities? Do you know how much a disgruntled former employee can make by selling lies to the highest bidder? Jenna shook her head. Jennifer, these statements weren't sold to tabloids. They were given to legitimate journalists as part of investigations into workplace practices in the entertainment industry. Investigations. Jennifer's eyes flashed dangerously. What investigations? Who authorized investigations into my business practices? What crime am I supposed to have committed? No one's suggesting you've committed any crimes, Jenna clarified. But when there are consistent reports of problematic workplace behavior, it becomes a story that the public has a right to know about. Jennifer stared at Jenna for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with barely controlled breathing. You know what the public has a right to know about? They have a right to know that I have been working in this industry for over 20 years without a single lawsuit, without a single legal complaint, without a single formal allegation of wrongdoing. That's a fair point, Jenna acknowledged. But just because something isn't illegal doesn't mean it's not harmful or inappropriate. And just because former employees make complaints doesn't make those complaints valid, Jennifer countered. People get fired from jobs every day. People fail to meet expectations every day. That doesn't automatically make their employers villains. Jenna consulted her notes one final time. Jennifer, I'm going to ask you one last direct question, and then I promise we can move on to discussing your tours. What question? Jennifer asked warily. If you had to do it all over again, is there anything you would change about how you manage your professional relationships? Jennifer stared at Jenna for what felt like an eternity, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Finally, she laughed, but it was a sound completely devoid of humor. You really don't get it, do you? She said, shaking her head. You really think I'm going to sit here and give you some kind of mea culpa, some tearful admission that I've been wrong all along? I think honest self-reflection is something we all benefit from, Jenna replied calmly. Here's my honest self-reflection, Jennifer said, her voice deadly serious. I am exactly who I need to be to succeed at the highest level of this industry. I make no apologies for my standards, my expectations, or my commitment to excellence, and I certainly don't need validation from people who have never achieved what I've achieved. With that, Jennifer turned on her heel and walked directly toward the studio exit, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Jenna called out one final time. Jennifer, the cameras are still rolling. Jennifer paused at the exit, turned back to face the camera directly, and spoke with icy precision. Good, let them roll. Let people see exactly what passes for journalism these days, and with that, she pushed through the studio doors and was gone, leaving Jenna standing alone in front of the cameras. The interview ending in the most dramatic fashion possible. Well, Jenna said, turning back to face the camera. With professional composure, that was certainly not how we expected this interview to go. The studio